Hello everyone. There's a very common sentiment on the internet that gaming just isn't the same as it used to be. And when people say this, they mean it in a variety of different ways, but predominantly the main things that you see is that games just aren't as good as they used to be. I see a lot of comments in my videos or in other people's videos about how modern games are trash, or that for some reason gaming just doesn't feel as joyful as it used to, or basically that something is different. Something just doesn't hit the same about gaming as it used to in the past. And I think there's a lot of reasons for this, because yes, gaming now is different than it used to be because hardware and technology has improved, and the technology behind the video games that we play is now different than it used to be. So there will be differences between games from the past and games today, but also there's just other factors around the overall culture surrounding gaming and things that are to do with how media has evolved in general and how we interact with media, and changes with our attention spans, and all of this sort of thing has had an impact on people's relationship with games now versus like 20 years ago. So as far as technology goes, hardware now is so powerful that there aren't really any limitations, or there are few limitations as to what developers can do when trying to create their vision in video game form. And obviously, with hardware limitations comes a level of creativity that I guess we don't really see anymore, to be honest, which does mean that games nowadays just don't feel as creative sometimes, to some extent, which doesn't mean that they're not good. It just means that there's a certain kind of clunky or a little bit of funky aspects to games that you used to have that you don't see anymore. And that was all part of the charm of older video games, but obviously that's very much been kind of ironed out when it comes to modern games. You don't really see any of that anymore. Another thing is there is a sense of uniformity between video games now that we didn't used to have. Now, I'm not a developer, so I'm not an expert on this, but it is true that a lot of modern games are all built in the same engine, so Unreal Engine or Unity. And if they're built in the same engine, there's definitely going to be similarities between these games in the way that they function and just the overall structure of these games. Whereas in the past, developers would have to build their own engines to develop video games with, because there wasn't ready-built engines that development studios could use. And the ones that did exist were quite expensive. So most studios opted to build their own engines, and this did lead to more diversity in a lot of ways with video games and just the way they felt to play. Another thing, of course, is with modern games, obviously the controls, there's a lot of uniformity with the way the controls operate. In most games, you know what the jump buttons are going to be, you know what the action button's going to be, you probably know which button it is you're going to have to use to shoot or use weapons or attack, because there's a lot of uniformity. Especially within games of certain genres. Across platformers, there's a certain kind of button layout that you kind of expect or know. Across first-person shooters, there's a similar button layout that you know to expect with, and same with JRPGs, same with all game genres. There's like a uniform button layout that most of them use. Of course, they do diversify a little bit from that, but in general, we kind of know what to expect, and all controllers have the same buttons on them now. They might be laid out slightly differently, but they have the same buttons, the same number. They all have 2 analog sticks, and they all have a D-pad. And I don't know what those buttons are called, but you know, the ones that are, for example, on PlayStation, triangle, circle, cross, square, those buttons, right? and then the analog triggers and all of that stuff. So you know what to expect with modern controllers. It's all the same, which has its advantages and disadvantages. It makes things, the uniformity probably kind of makes things a bit more streamlined for developers, I assume. And it does mean that once you've played a few video games, you get used to the controller and you know your way around a modern controller easily. Whereas with old controllers, they could really vary, especially in the earlier days of game consoles. Some controllers were very different to each other. So yes, these also lead to more of a uniformity with modern games that you didn't see in older games. So yes, there is that aspect. And like I said, I'm not a professional. I don't know the ins and outs of all of this sort of thing, but these are pretty obvious things, I guess, that people would notice that make games feel different. But then in terms of the culture and how we interact with games now versus the past, one thing to note, obviously, is I think a lot of us, when we talk about in the past, we mean when we were teenagers or kids. And something that unfortunately is just gone and we're never going to get back is our childhoods and that sense of childhood wonder and those feelings you get when you've not played many video games and you're exploring these games for the first time and you haven't played many and everything's really new, and every time you play another game it just feels like a brand new experience. Once you've played quite a few games, that feeling starts to go a bit, because even with older games there's only so much like diversity you can have with video games, you know? There's also the sense of childlike wonder that just goes when you become an adult. You don't really feel it much, if ever, really anymore. It's something that I think a lot of us search for and chase, but we struggle to experience again as adults. We might come across the odd experience like that as adults, but it's definitely a rarity, whereas in our childhoods it was a common thing that we would experience on a regular basis. And another thing is there has been a lot of other changes as well. I mean, things have gone from everything just being physical media to there being digital versions of games you can buy, to there even being subscription services like Xbox Game Pass or PSN, and I think it's called PSN. And this kind of goes for people's relationship with other forms of media as well, such as music. Because of streaming services, everything is at the touch of your finger and you can just go to something else. Also, because of short form content platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels and even YouTube Shorts, our attention spans, they're not what they used to be. And this all plays into how we interact with video games. We struggle to stay concentrated for as long as we used to in the past when we were kids, but also I think people that are of an older generation that experienced gaming in their 20s before all of this short form content would also agree that back then people had better attention spans when it came to video games, you know? And also this overwhelming amount of choice means that we don't give games as much of a chance as we used to, and we kind of drop them quicker or lose interest faster as well, because we know, oh well, I'm not really enjoying this game as much as I hoped I would, so I'm going to try this other game because I have a Game Pass subscription anyway, so I'm just going to try this. And this also applies to other forms of media. Like, people do this on Netflix as well, drop shows a lot quicker than we would have done in the past. So this is all a result of a seemingly unlimited amount of choice, shorter attention spans, and yeah. Again, children do seem to have a longer attention span, or at least I did as a kid. I used to have a longer attention span and more patience with things like video games than I do now. I can't sit down and play a video game for as long as I used to as a child unless I'm streaming. Otherwise, I have to get up, walk away, get a snack or something, have a chat with someone in the house, I don't know, and then come back and continue gaming, or maybe it will be a long break even, I don't know. But when I was a kid, I used to be able to sit there for hours in front of the TV and play video games. And the other thing, of course, is as adults, and I'm going to assume that a lot of you watching are adults, we don't have as much free time as we used to as kids. So that also plays a big part. We don't have as much patience as we used to. And I'm not saying don't drop games. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't drop games. I think it's good to advocate for dropping games, because that's the thing, especially adults, we don't have as much free time as we used to, particularly people with full-time jobs. Finding time for hobbies if you have a full-time job is not easy. And adults are also just kind of tired from work and stuff, so don't have as much mental capacity even to play video games a lot of the time, because it does require a certain amount of mental capacity, which if you work a 9 to 5, I know when I used to work a 9 to 5, I was tired pretty much all the time. Not necessarily like, oh my God, I'm gonna fall asleep, but there was this certain level of mental fatigue and kind of a level of stimulation I'd had from being at work all day that led to me not really feeling like playing video games when I got home from work necessarily. So these are all things that lead to gaming feeling so different now compared to in the past, when perhaps some of us were kids or teens. But even for people who would have been adults like 20 years ago, it is definitely different now, because of how much our culture has shifted and how the game industry has shifted. Now, another thing I see a lot is that modern games are trash, which I mentioned at the beginning of this video. I don't agree with that sentiment, but there are elements of modern games, not all modern games, but a growing element of modern games that I don't like, and it's things like microtransactions and having gacha elements in games, or sometimes even ads. These are all things that I don't like. They just feel very immersion breaking, because for me, video games are kind of a form of escapism. I don't like having microtransactions or ads or gacha elements in games, especially microtransactions. That's the most annoying one. And I mean, there is an argument for microtransactions, because the thing is gaming is becoming more expensive. So video games, if you want to buy a video game outright, it's like $70 nowadays, in some cases 80 even. So for people that like playing video games but don't have the money to drop on a $70 game or $60 or, God forbid, $80, free games with microtransactions are an option. Now, obviously, personally, I do not like them, but that is an argument for them. You know, that is an argument that you could make for free games that have microtransactions. The only problem is that there are quite a lot of them that are quite scummy in how they implement the microtransactions, and they like to put certain essential elements or essential items behind paywalls in the game sometimes, and make it just very hard or sometimes even impossible to progress through the game without actually spending any of your own money. And sometimes that can then mount up to being a lot of money, and in some cases more than a game, like a standard game, would have cost in the first place. So with microtransactions, you have to tread carefully. And I just steer away from it. I just don't like it. But you can make an argument for it. But I've noticed a lot of people on the internet in the gaming space really don't like microtransactions, and I don't. But that's just me. And the other thing is, there's been a big push for online service games, and I don't have a problem necessarily with online service games. I don't particularly enjoy them, they're not for me. But the problem that I do have with them is that once the servers for online games are shut down, then they're just kind of lost. And the money that you've spent on these online service games is completely wasted, because we don't really have any sort of preservation for video games at the moment, which forces companies to keep a game like available or update it so that it can be played offline for users that have paid for this game. There aren't protections in place for that, although that seems like it might change with the Stop Killing Games movement. And this has actually been brought up at Parliament in the UK over the last couple of weeks, which is kind of surprising because I did not think that would happen. So yes, there's a lot of elements. There's a lot of elements that lead to gaming just feeling very different. And a lot of this is driven by the really big corporations within the gaming space that obviously are very profit driven. But the AAA game formula of building a really, really, really expensive game, one that costs millions of dollars to develop, and then selling it at $70 doesn't work too well, because there's been so many cases of companies saying that they haven't made as much money as they'd wanted to on this game. Some of them are kind of just breaking even. And I'm not saying raise the prices for games, okay? I don't want the prices of games to go up, but this is a model that AAA gaming and a lot of these big corporations currently have that isn't really sustainable, at least at the moment, because if they wanted to sustain that, they would have to put the prices of games up even more. But that in itself would be a big problem, because how many of us are going to pay $100 for a game? I'm not paying $100 for a game. I don't have that kind of money, and nor do 90% of people watching this video, I would assume. So it is a bit of a dilemma, but it's not like there aren't different models or different things they could do. They could focus on developing more AA games, so games that have smaller budgets, than just focusing so much on AAA. And I don't necessarily think that AAA has to go completely as a model. It's just that they kind of need to have other stuff going on. They need to have other smaller, cheaper projects, not just remakes and remasters, but new IPs or new games that aren't as expensive to make, in order for the game industry to kind of sustain itself into the future. I don't think it's like gonna crash and burn within the next few years or something, but if they want to really keep the gaming industry going strong, then they're gonna have to do something. They're gonna have to start developing games with smaller budgets. Like, the indie game space is booming right now for a reason. And it's because I think a lot of people don't really care that much about AAA games nowadays. I quite like some, but I have to admit that a lot of the AAA games that release don't really interest me that much. Final Fantasy is a AAA game franchise that we know that I really like, but outside of Final Fantasy, there aren't really that many that grab my interest. It's usually AA's or indies, or, you know, just overall smaller projects that I'm particularly interested in, or older games. And that's not to say that these AAA games aren't good, but I guess people are a little bit tired of them maybe, and people want other things. Games that perhaps have a smaller budget. Like Astrobot is a good example. Expedition 33 is another really good example. Expedition 33 is an indie, but it is, I guess, like a AA kind of game. You can tell it doesn't quite have the polish of a AAA, but it is a really good game experience. And, you know, these are examples of games that perhaps the industry should be focusing more on making in the future. But anyway, those are just my thoughts. I don't think that modern games are trash. I see people throw that around all the time. I don't agree with that. I don't think that they're trash. And there are a lot of games that come out nowadays that I do like. It's just that something needs to change because it's not quite working financially for the gaming industry, right? And there's a lot of elements of modern gaming that a lot of gamers don't like microtransactions. A lot of people really don't like gacha games. A lot of people don't like online service games. There's a lot of people really pushing for there to be more offline single player game experiences, which is what I personally really like. Those are my favourite kinds of games. But anyway, that's just me. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye!